the radio for sound is more important than anything else.
I don't know who all live here.
Hello. Is this, yes, it's working. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Vice Mayor Love, and I'm going to call to order this City of Gallatin special call joint work session of the City Council and Planning Commission for June 25th, 2024. Mary Ann is going to take the roll for us.
Mayor Brown, Vice Mayor Love,
Here.
Councilman Carter, Councilman Fan, Councilman Fennell, Councilman Hayes,
Present.
Councilman Jovance,
Present.
Chair Harris,
Here.
Vice Chair Morrell, Mr. Pereira, Mr. Strouder, Mr. Thompson.
Present.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Ann. Tonight, we have on our agenda a discussion of the zoning code update project with the consultants from Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. And we also have on the agenda a public recognition on this item. I just want to remind everyone that this tonight is only a presentation and discussion. Nothing will be decided upon at all. However, if you would like to come and speak on this, please go to the podium and give us your name and address and speak for 5 minutes.
I'm not going to speak for 5 minutes, just a real quick comment. Michelle Juvance, 1335 Long Hollow Pike. I wanted to just put on the record that Plan Gallatin, in my opinion, does not represent what the citizens had wanted with all of the surveys that they did. It definitely doesn't represent what I did when I did the surveys, and I did see all of the meetings and all of the survey. And I saw what people wanted, and it doesn't represent it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Okay, thank you. And at this time, I'm going to introduce Brian Rose, who is the City of Gallatin's planning head of department, and he is going to take the meeting over from right now. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. Again, my name is Brian Rose. I'm the city planner for Gallatin. Really glad to be able to be here with you all tonight. Glad to see so many good smiling faces. We've got our city is working on the ZOCO planning project, which is our zoning ordinance update. And we've got our consultants here tonight from TPUDC, that's Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. So I'm going to introduce Bill Wright and Anna Blevins. They are here representing TPUDC tonight. They'll be giving us a presentation on their analysis of our current status with our Plan Gallatin, and then how that is going to sort of play into what the zoning ordinance update process will start to look like. But of course, the zoning ordinance is in effect attempting to implement our comprehensive plan. So largely we'll be looking at that for guidance on how the ordinance is written. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn the rest of the time to them. They'll make a presentation, and then our City Council and Planning Commission members will have an opportunity to ask any questions that they would like to afterwards. So.
Good afternoon. That's not working. Turn it on.
Is it working?
No.
I think mine is working.
Okay, help her. Maybe it's working. Okay. apologize. I haven't ever used a lapel mic, and so I'm having to talk louder than you do when you have it right here. I'm Bill Wright. This is Anna Blevins. We're from TPUDC, and we're just going to try to run through our evaluation of the comp plan, and then an evaluation of what we've heard and what we've found so far in the zoning ordinance, the existing zoning ordinance.
You got the clicker.
I got to get the clicker so you can hear everything on this side, nothing on this side. Okay. This is just the rest of our team. Brian Wright, the principal, who spoke to us the other night. He had other obligations tonight, and but our names are the same coincidentally because he's my son, and I'm the lawyer in the group, and he's the planner in the group, and some of the other planners that'll be involved in the project. So we started out with this the comprehensive plan evaluation. One of the things we wanted to point out on the very front end is that we're so early in the project that we haven't gotten significant input from the entire town. That's what the Planapalooza is all about later. And so this is an early step. We've reviewed the comp plan multiple times, and so it's just kind of our take on the comp plan. Same thing goes for the zoning ordinance. We've been through the existing ordinance many times in spite of it being over 400 pages long, and sort of trying to address what we know needs to be fixed in it and that sort of thing. So, but the outreach process will continue on through the whole project. So just a kind of a 101, the comp plans, it's a long-range policy document. It's not the law, it's not regulatory, but all the zoning has to derive from a comprehensive plan. And so one of the things we will focus on is getting the zoning ordinance consistent with the comprehensive plan. It establishes a vision for the city. It's a policy guidance device for growth and development and where that happens, whether growth here, development there, or any other mix of all that. And then it has, at the end of it, action items that direct the city to take certain actions to implement the vision in the comp plan. It has a few themes: planned growth, efficient transportation, economic opportunity, natural beauty, community focus, and then the definition of spaces. The goals that are laid out are to build a prosperous economy, create a sense of place, provide a livable community, and invest in quality infrastructure. The two that are most impacted by a code revision are numbers 2 and 3 in terms of sort of what are you trying to get the code to do. Though if you can get those two right, it'll help you build a prosperous economy, and the quality infrastructure will come from, how the roads are laid out and, all of that. And so they all have an interplay, but numbers 2 and 3 are the biggest things insofar as the code project goes. The comp plan addresses growth by having areas that are intended to change only minimally, and those are designated as sustain areas. Another level of focus support, which is don't change very much, but it may need some help, and that's the nurture level. And then accelerate, which is actually proactive change. If you have an area that's, for instance, run down, and you're trying to get it to transition to something that's more productive, that's where you would be going there. Or if you have an area that you're trying to actually increase the intensity of, or the density of, the accelerate designation would be placed on those areas. So they're mapped here. We didn't map them there in the comp plan this way. That's like a level of analysis that the comp plan has in it that starts leading you through a couple of other layers of analysis. There are a number of character areas that are designated in the comp plan, being the downtown core, the general urban character area, suburban, which is essentially single-family residential, the rural countryside, and it sort of speaks for itself, and then natural and conservation areas. And again, those are mapped here, and they're mapped in the comp plan. Within those character areas, there are a few sub-areas that the comp plan designates. They're laid out here. The blue color at the top is mixed-use activity centers. The gray is major employment centers, which I sort of think about as being more industrial-ish, but maybe some commercial-ish. And then the mixed-use commercial sub-area, and those are the purple color. Those tend to be lined along corridors the way that they're mapped in the comp plan. So you have those three general approaches and designations. And so what you have to do from there is essentially take those, synthesize the three of those, how they impact any given area, and then develop a system of districts from that. We're way too early in the process at this point to be talking about what districts specifically we're even talking about. We'll need to be getting more input from you guys about the current zoning versus what the comp plan's calling for, and a number of other things. This is the way those three designations sort of work, if you think about them as layers that get layered onto a piece of land. And then I talked about synthesizing all that information and turning it into a system of zoning districts. This is sort of where we are right now. The top three bars are those levels of sustain through accelerate. The next layers is showing which of the character areas lie within each of those growth, sustain versus accelerate, and then below that, those sub areas I just talked about, which of those fall within each of the anticipated degrees of change. I was supposed to go click, click, click on this. I'm not very good with animated slides, obviously. So the recommendations within Plan Gallatin, the comp plan, for updating the zoning ordinance is to ensure that the vision and policies and recommendations of Plan Gallatin are implemented within the zoning revision. And there's specific language in the comp plan that talks about needing to incorporate a form-based approach to zoning as opposed to entirely a use-based approach to zoning, which it essentially is right now for the downtown, and then for other areas where the form and the function of the buildings actually are more influential on the quality of the place than the underlying land use would be. Over on the right side, that's just basically showing how the conventional zoning addresses density and use and floor area and setbacks, and it's really nearly so minimal that it can't possibly create an intended place. And then there's some zoning guidelines that are, and design guidelines that are laid on each, not on every zone, on some zones, that basically try to get to a point of better design, but it's a little bit haphazard. And then form-based codes instead are their primary organizational and substantive output is that the streetscapes and the building types and, how high the buildings are and, how much of the building site needs to front a road, all those things end up being standards within the form-based code that are based on the DNA of the best places that y'all can think of here in Gallatin. So we actually go out and measure those best places and figure out what makes them best, what makes you think they're best. Is it that they address the street in a good way? Is it the building itself? Is it how much glass is in the front of the building as opposed to a solid brick wall while you're walking next to it? It's like, what are those things? So the Plan Gallatin emphasizes preserving character and creating a sense of place. That's essentially language intending to get you to have form-based zoning, at least in some areas of the city. It encourages protection of natural areas and rural character. And I know you're focused on that, Preserve Gallatin, with your t-shirt. I love y'all's t-shirt. It supports mixed-use, walkable, compact development as opposed to sprawling development. Some of Gallatin's zoning patterns, just like everywhere in the country, are based on really a sprawling development pattern. I was shocked today. We just got back from our tour of the city. I was so surprised how huge geographically Gallatin is. It is a big place. And there are places where the land could have been used more effectively than it was. There are still places right this second that the land can be used more effectively than it is. Sort of the flip side of that is the more effective you use the places you do develop, the more open space that is left. And so if you can kind of get that in your head as just a basic premise, it starts addressing some of the development issues, that you do want to have development. City needs development. It's going to have development. City also needs to preserve open spaces to the extent that it can. Of course, everybody that owns a piece of property has property rights to that. You can't just say, no, you can't build there. If you say, no, you can't build there, then the city's got to buy the property. And that's not typically what the cities are looking to do. But it can all go hand in hand if you have your whole development model and your zoning ordinance takes those things into account when it's being written. So the comp plan discourages sprawl. We already talked, it encourages the form-based zoning in downtown and other areas that are influenced by highly by the sort of the character of the place. It supports a mix of housing options. We've had some people talk about workforce housing. We've had other people talk about we need some housing options other than huge ones, but we need huge houses too. It needs to literally be a place for everybody. And I read somewhere on you guys' website, it talked about sort of the city's policy of kind of welcoming everybody, and everybody's a part of it. And so it's not just that means it's not an us and them kind of thing. This is a city kind of thing. It calls for improved transportation. We're not focused really on a transportation plan per se. That's going on in another project. We'll be coordinating with them. It does, though, get implemented in zoning because you want transportation options to be not only the automobile, you also want to have it be bike friendly, pedestrian friendly, make some other ways to get around other than just jumping in a car. And obviously places like downtown are easier to do that in than out on one of the corridors that where all the big boxes and franchises are. We were talking in the tour today about whether there's no sidewalk along here. And I realized if there were a sidewalk, I'm not sure anybody would have been on it because the distances are so vast. And I know they wouldn't have been on it today. We got hot just walking around downtown. So at any rate, and the Plan Gallatin also speaks to the need for parks and greenways and civic spaces. Again, going back to that open space concept. This is yours. That's Anna's time.
All right, thanks, Bill. So comp plan is definitely higher level, more visionary. Now we're going to get into the actual zoning ordinance that we'll be updating. What it does well, what it doesn't do well, what it regulates, what it doesn't regulate. So these are just some of the things that we've already noticed. But before we go into that, a reminder that the zoning ordinance groups land into different areas, also known as zoning districts, with different rules about what you can build or do in each one. It doesn't actually build anything, but it tells you what you can and cannot do. And it also guides and limits what people can build in different zoning districts. It also keeps things away that are noisy, smelly, loud, or dangerous, prevents overcrowding, protects public health and safety and welfare, balances your property rights, it should reduce your dependence on the car. It can protect the most loved parts of your neighborhood and enhance areas that need improvement. And finally, it creates something for everyone in the right place for everything, like Bill was saying. So some of the things that we found, first of all, it's very obviously rooted in 1920s conventional separation of uses concept. So basically it's a use-based code, like you said, that's not unusual. They're all over the country. It appears to have been amended piecemeal over the years. Some of it dates back to 1979, so definitely time for an update. We were actually asking the planner, Jillian, today or yesterday about the oldest zoning ordinance that she has in her office, and she said 1955. But it's time for a rewrite.
We suspect that parts of the existing zoning actually derived from the 1955 code. I'm looking forward to, I enjoy talking to you guys, but I'm looking forward to going to Jillian's office and pulling out the 55 code because I know I will recognize provisions in it.
So some of the things that the zoning ordinance needs to do, and these definitely align with the comp plan, is create better, more predictable development. We've kind of already heard that from the public about we don't know what development's going to look like until it's done, or we're just not happy with how it's looking. It needs to be consistent with the comp plan, as he said. One thing we've heard often is it's just not user-friendly. Can be better organized, needs more graphics, more visuals. It's just not the most fun document to look at, and as fun as the zoning ordinance can be. And then also just providing for a variety of housing options, like he said as well. So some of the just best practices that we follow that are nationwide, it should be, that we can implement here. First of all, like I said, well organized. Internal consistency, because it's been amended piecemeal so much, there are some inconsistencies that we've noticed, and I know staff deals with those often. Attractive, readable, graphic, easy to use, highly illustrative. There's a lot of things that can be put into a table that are right now just a paragraph, and it's a lot easier to understand when you can just go straight to the table and understand what it is that you can or can't do. Understandable is a big one. Sometimes it's a lot of subjectivity or interpretation, so the more understandable it is, the easier it is for people to implement, especially staff. And again, that goes into being easy to administer. Context-based, conventional zoning ordinances typically are not context-based, meaning just like what's going on around you. And that's a huge part of form-based, is you're looking at where it is, what it's relating to on the ground. Objective standards, kind of mentioned that already, that can deliver what the city is looking for. Focusing on the form, character, and placemaking rather than the use that's inside of the building. And also clear procedures. That's something that we hear all around the country, is staff just has their own way of doing things, or they have to follow the state, and it's really complicated. And obviously, we're going to, abide by the state statutes, but there's some things that we have some leeway on, and we want to clean those up. So the project will include improvements based on these practices. So these are just some examples. This was kind of fun to do, but a big part of this is you have like 25 districts, some of which are no longer applicable. So definitely can clean up some of that, and just kind of like condensing districts, because some are just really not necessary anymore. Definitions, we've heard a lot about that. We know there's a lot of subjectivity and kind of just being unclear. Just one example I found is dwelling two-family is defined twice. Why? I don't know. There are different definitions. But then you've also got these activity types that are similar to uses, but they're more categorical in a way. And so it's kind of like, which one do you follow? How do they mesh together? Sometimes they don't. So cleaning that up too would be a big thing that we do. We've heard a lot about the open space term. So common open space, what is it? This definition isn't that clear. What qualifies as open space? Because it's an important part of preservation and just making a place in general. Kind of like I said earlier with activity types, land use classifications, endless pages of use classifications that you don't really need. It's an entire article and it's 17 pages. And then you also talk about uses in your district article. So it's a lot to kind of like mesh together and understand. Similar thing, uses and the conditions for your uses. This is the same use, automotive repair and cleaning and automotive servicing. Two different places, different conditions. Some of them are the same, but some are not. And so you might miss one. And what happens when you do that? So that's just an example, but I know that there are others as well. Updated parking standards, that's one we've heard a lot about as well from staff specifically, but lots and lots of pages on parking. Architectural standards, they're pretty dated. We've heard a lot about the minimum 70% brick or stone requirement. That's something that we definitely are going to be looking into, and just understand why, what's the point, how can we fix that, how can we update that, because it's not really context specific, and it also doesn't necessarily help you achieve the character that you're looking for in Gallatin. Too many buffers. This is another one. Just this section alone is 12 pages, but lots and lots of buffer standards that are hard to follow, and it's just a lot. Revamping of the sign ordinance, 42 pages of signs. And that's just one section in an article, but we do sign ordinances a lot, and try to remove some of the subjectivity and just make it more clear of what you can and cannot do. And finally, procedures, like we said, need to be clearly spelled out, cleaned up, and more efficient. So we're definitely working with staff on those. We've heard a lot about annexation and rezoning and all the fun things. So that's kind of our initial evaluation of the zoning ordinance. But we also want to take a minute to just let you guys know about Planapalooza, because that'll be a really, really important time to give us your feedback. We'll be up here. Just a quick timeline of how this is working. Right now, we're at the evaluation update, and then we'll get to the Planapalooza, which is in about 2.5 weeks. So July 12th through 15th, it's Friday through Monday. And we start with an opening presentation. That'll be at 6 p.m. Every event will be at the station, which we got to tour today, and we're really, really excited about that space. It's super cool. And then we will, over the next couple of days, Saturday and Sunday, have a few topical meetings. So we'll be discussing housing, public frontages and streetscapes, how buildings interact with the street, and then parks and open spaces. We know that's a big topic here as well. It's important. And then we will have our final closing kind of work in progress presentation on Monday night at 6 p.m. And we'll just kind of show more of what we've been hearing, some ideas, ways that we can go about updating the ordinance. So we've got the website, Zoco Gallatin. So stay tuned with that. It's already up and running, and it's got more project updates, and it'll be updated throughout the process. That's all we got.
I'm going to go get us a couple of chairs.
Could you put that website back up?
Yeah. And it's got forums as well, so there's some questions, and you can just give some ideas. We've got more details about the schedule, too, for the Planapalooza.
Thank you all for that great presentation. Is there anyone who would like to have any questions or comments? It's Matt.
Hey, good evening. I'm Matt Harris. I'm the chairman of the Planning Commission. One question I had is, do you have much experience or how form-based codes can be used in residential areas for subdivision development?
And absolutely. There's one specific district in sort of the normative range of character districts. One of them is specifically the suburban district, and it's essentially single-family residential subdivisions. That is it. So yes, we have experience with it. Yes, we've done it a bunch of times. So that's I guess the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Just a quick question. First, thank you for bringing the open space definition. That makes me feel less stupid because I've been bringing that for 4 years now, and that has been pushed right, left. You guys are the planning to say, we'll see later, we'll work on it. So thank you, because that's, I think that's one of the most used loophole in the developments in our city. So that's the first thing. My other question, are you gonna fix the inconsistencies between Plan Gallatin and the code? Because if I look at your presentation on the map base, and I see, the majority of the city is basically at a slow change. It's on a really light blue, but we see on this map development coming and putting thousands of houses on the spot was supposed to be slow change. So that's kind of inconsistent with...
It is. It's unfortunate, but what we write in the revised ordinance is not going to apply to things that have already come through the process. It's, like I said, it's unfortunate, but people, when they get a project approved, they end up with vested rights, and that's vested right statute's part of the state law. So it's not like it can be changed midstream with those guys. When we're going forward, we'll be using those 3 layers of analysis that Plan Gallatin have. We'll be using it intensely to generate the zoning districts and what'll go where, and how much growth will go where. One of the things that we'll focus on the sort of the rural countryside as a thing. I'm not sure that's really been a focus at this point. But you don't necessarily want the same development pattern being used all the way from here all the way out to the county line. You just don't. It's just not. It's just not the way it needs to be done. It needs to be it's a balancing act, and so that's part of what we'll be getting y'all's input on further during the charrette and that whole process.
What I was really looking for is, let me rephrase, can we expect some input from you on the inconsistency you find on the Plan Gallatin, so we can work to make that's a livable document. We can change things in it.
I mean, you can change. You definitely can change
Yeah,
Plain
so-
Gallatin, but sort of our scope of our project is sort of opposite that. That we are required to take Plain Gallatin as the given comp plan and create the zoning code from it, not vice versa. So, excuse me.
Yeah. Well, I guess just kind of to that comment, Mr. Javance, I think, when we did Plan Gallatin, like I said, it's a living document, and I think the natural progression of this project is using that as a starting point, getting the zoning ordinances updated based on as it is. My expectation, I think there's a conversation after the zoning ordinance process where we may indeed go back and look at those degrees of change. Now that we have a zoning ordinance that's being applied to
Yeah.
Plan Gallatin, that would be the appropriate time to go back and look at, do
Right.
these things make sense now that we have an updated zoning
Yep.
plan, and how's it going to get implemented? So I think those two things are naturally.
So
need to happen.
the comp plan can be amended by a process that's in the procedures. Planning Commission can
That's correct.
initiate one, City Council can initiate one.
Yeah, the process would, it would start with the Planning Commission, initiate
Well,
a change.
even a landowner can initiate one with respect to his land.
That's correct. Yeah, we saw a lot of that with Gallatin on the Move 2020 as it was becoming an older document, that as projects would come through in areas, we were
Right.
seeing that having to be amended because, things had changed over the 20-year period.
Yep.
Another thing I'll add too is those 3 maps that Bill was talking about need some nuance. They're pretty general. I mean, there's like large swaths of land that just say general urban. It's like, what does that mean? And then also, I was in GIS just kind of like layering all of these and seeing how they fit with each other, and they don't. They kind of do to an extent, but trying to figure out how we can correct those when it comes to a zoning map as well.
Will the format that you put it out in be completely searchable, drill down, using all the latest technology so
Well,
it's
it-
easier to access?
it'll be-
Right now, it's a document.
It'll be a PDF online, and you can search in a PDF. It's not proposed right this second for it to be, say the word.
Hyperlink?
Hyperlinked. Have to ask a younger generation to give me that word. Hyperlinked.
That's the word I was searching for.
Hyperlinked is a massive undertaking
It is.
in a big document. It's not to say that it's not valuable. It is very valuable. The city of Franklin has theirs hyperlinked. At least they have their table of contents, their definitions, their like any article can be jumped to. Like if you find a reference in one article to another article, you can hit that and go to it, but it's still not 100% hyperlinked. And they basically had an employee work most of a year doing that hyperlinking. So it's a very involved thing. It's not that it's hard, it's just there's so many different elements to hyperlinking it.
To jump on that, would it at least be bookmarked to where we can at least jump to a certain section without having to scroll through the whole thing?
Bookmarked. Explain to me, I mean, I know what a bookmark is, but it's a physical thing I put in my novel. So what do you mean?
Basically, at a minimum, hyperlinking the table of contents.
The section to the table.
Well, I mean, we'll just have to figure that out.
Okay.
Again, that's not part of the scope that we've been hired to do,
Yeah.
but it could be, you know.
Okay.
And that getting that to work too could be a secondary project after this. So.
Yep.
Did anyone else want to ask any questions, or Mayor Brown, did you want to say anything? I didn't know this was open to the public to speak.
No, I just saw Councilman Carter sitting.
Oh, I didn't know Councilman Carter was here. Did you want to say anything?
Surprise. I think,
Okay, Matt.
Madam Chair, I think they said that it was open to comment, but it's not a question-answer sort of session. Am I saying that right, Brian?
You were right. That's why we did the public comment at the beginning of the
Yeah.
meeting. So, look, I don't really have any other questions on it. Obviously, it's early in the project, but excited to see this finally come to fruition.
Me too.
We are too.
From a planning commission standpoint, the zoning ordinance is clearly dated and cumbersome,
Yeah.
and I'm personally looking forward to see how this rewrite goes to give better guidance for how the city is going to develop in good patterns. So, but
I know the chairman asked the question about the form-based code, and you had answered from a, I guess, a suburban residential standpoint.
Right.
I know the note on there stated that the downtown area was going to be more form-based than other areas, and I think when I asked Brian when he was here last week, he said that there are going to be some certain character areas that have form-based. You had mentioned that you're going to use certain areas that are already in the city of Gallatin as the go-by for that form-based, but are you also going to implement things that are going, like, I guess, good go-bys from other municipalities into the zoning code? Because I know there are certain municipalities that I've personally worked in where they're entirely form-based, and that can be a good go-by, but it can also be overwhelming at the same time.
So we typically would not go to another city to look for the best unless there's a missing piece in Gallatin.
Okay.
If for instance, there's the general urban character district is a transitional, mixed use, not quite as urban as this, but probably as urban as out there as you're coming into town. But while that's not the best part of Gallatin by any stretch of the imagination, there are standards that can make that super fantastic. We haven't seen any really good, we call it District 4, Character District 4 is the general urban district. We haven't located good examples of excellent general urban yet. And we hope that, if there's some part of it that y'all thinks is kind of smaller scale, mixed use, urban walkable thing, if y'all can point us to it, we go out and measure it and use that. Otherwise, we'll find, a nearby city that you guys, during the Planapalooza, that we're going to ask everybody, where's your favorite places and all that stuff, and get direction sort of, so we can go measure there. So.
And I know we've been talking about the migration to a form-based code for almost a decade, but a question I've been wanting to ask, is it an either-or question, or is it an
It's
and
not.
question?
It's not an either-or question. Virtually 90%, I'd say, of the ordinances that have form-based districts in them are some form of a hybrid, so that they have some conventional districts, and this is basically what your comp plan recognizes when it says put it in downtown and other areas where the character and the place is significantly impacted by the development pattern. So in other places, there's not a whole, for instance, like in the rural character district, which is CD2, there's not a whole lot of difference between a typical agricultural conventional zone and a CD2 rural zone. But the sort of the more urbanized you get, the more impact the form base has, the better, as far as creating a better place. So.
But even in a form-based code, undesirable uses will be restricted, and
they will. They definitely will. We didn't focus on that as much. We say it's not what we ought to be saying is not solely use-based,
Yeah.
but it clearly.
There will be a use
It's
table.
going to have a use table, and it's going to be based on what your use table is now, other than where we can improve it. Because honestly, and I was thinking as Anna was talking about the uses, the code is obsessed with breaking apart uses that are so identical, and they, you can do this in that district, but not this in that district. Brian always points out, he has an example, and he always says, so like, and he may have used it the other
I
night,
think he
actually.
did.
And he says, okay, so you have a bakery, and then you have a bakery that makes donuts versus one that makes bagels, and they both got a hole in the middle of them. Why can't they be in this, why are you breaking it down that far? It makes no sense. And there are a lot of including yours, a lot of zoning ordinances that are broken down that way.
Have you guys addressed, I guess, the concept of transfer of property rights for trading higher density, lower density in areas? And I asked the question. We run into situations where a developer's agreed to make a concession to say, I'm going to put this over here, but I'll never ask for it over here, and then lo and behold, years down the road, they're back going, well, things have changed.
If you lose track of all that, it's really a disaster. And so TDRs, transfer of development rights, I guess are a great, in my judgment, they're a great concept. I've not ever seen them used to good effect, particularly in the South where there's so much unused land. There's really just like, to get somebody to, there's just not a market for the rights to develop that land way the heck out there and put it down here. And then you have just administrative, what you're just talking about, it's sort of a nightmare keeping up with it too. So we do not recommend them typically, but it's a great idea, but it's.
In theory.
Well, that's why I asked the question, because it's a term, we've talked about it here and there, but I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently. So.
The one thing that we have seen have some value is a well-crafted conservation development concept where the developer actually sets aside a high percentage of his land, and then there are covenants and there are restrictions put on that land for perpetuity. They can't get an end around it.
I was just going to say that I envision the transfer of development rights also working in a similar manner, in that they could create a conservation easement on property that's not necessarily attached to their property, but elsewhere, so that it's perpetually preserved.
Maybe, but again, it's going to require that vast amount of additional acreage y'all have to have a pretty high value for development.
No, I'm saying it would be perpetually preserved through their action to get more density elsewhere. And I mean, and I do see the conservation easement being cumbersome, and somebody has to keep that up and keep up with it. But even if it were to be, preserved and donated to the city or something like that, just, I want some kind of something that, some concession that is made to grant higher density development in some cases. We need that value to come with it, when instead of, I feel like we just sacrifice sometimes and we don't realize anything coming into us as a result. And I don't know what that tool is.
Again, when you have as much open space as is there has to be a market that where you can have an exchange of development rights for agreeing not to develop somewhere else. And if there's not a market for that.
But I'm not talking about the transfer of development rights. I'm sorry to interrupt. As we typically think of it, I'm thinking of some Gallatin-centric thing where, hey, you're buying this land for us to keep.
That's great if Gallatin wants to pay the price for the land. But that's
well, no, okay. I'm saying that say a developer has a piece of property and they don't have land within that development where they can preserve it, right?
Yeah.
So they go somewhere else and they preserve it and they donate it for parkland, or they put a the conservation easements make me uneasy because somebody has to manage those long term, and if somebody stops paying and taking care of them, what's the recourse? But if it were to come under the city's control and we put it under a conservation easement,
Yeah.
that's a different scenario. So I'm not looking for a way to monetize it for that developer.
Yeah,
I'm
got
trying
it.
to look at a way to make it palatable for us as a city to add to our, green space inventory, if you will.
It's essentially like adding parkland at that point. Yep. Yep.
I wasn't going to bring up TDRs because I thought that was too broad, but you started it. So, no, that's been on my wish list for a decade. And I know this, the classic story of Union Station and Grand Central Station in New York. That's the argument against TDRs. But I still think that what the mayor's talking about could be done in the sense if we want to encourage high density development in areas in order to preserve our rural character outside the city, why can't we grant that in the high density corridor areas and then in exchange for that land in the outer areas being put into the Tennessee Land Trust?
And so perhaps you could. It's a lot like when somebody has land with wetlands on it, and you can mitigate using the wetlands here, fill them up, provide them somewhere else. So it's essentially like that, it sounds like.
Offsite stormwater mitigation.
Yep.
Well, maybe I didn't have a question. I sure do have a one.
Great comment.
I think. I was gonna say, I just know we're about 8 minutes before 6 o'clock with the city council meeting coming soon, so I'm gonna pass the microphone back to Vice Mayor Love so she can wrap this up.
All right, thank you. That was some great discussion, and we learned a lot. I had no idea that zoning ordinance needed to be cleaned up quite as badly as it does. So
It really does.
thank you all for being here. Thanks for the Planning Commission and the City Council people who were here. Thank you all for being here and giving us a great presentation. Thank you, public, for coming. We'll look forward to July 12th through the 15th at the station for Planapalooza. Is there a motion that we adjourn? All right, we have all in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.